She had always loved music. From the time she could remember, the sound of a piano made her heart beat faster, made her forget everything else around her. Her small fingers would move over the keys, producing the softest melodies. Gentle and simple, but to her, they were everything. She lived in a small apartment in the city, where the streets were always noisy and crowded. Yet, when she played, the noise seemed to disappear. And all that mattered was the music she created. Her family was supportive but practical. They admired her dedication but often reminded her that life was not just about music. Her mother worked long hours at a hospital, caring for people, and her father had a small repair shop in the neighborhood. They understood her passion, but wanted her to have something to fall back on. Sometimes she felt torn between her love for music and the expectations of those around her. But whenever she touched the piano, everything else faded away. She was not the kind of person who liked attention. In school, she sat quietly in the back of the classroom, listening, learning, and observing. She was kind and helpful, but she did not seek to stand out. Music was her world, her escape, and she liked it that way. Every afternoon, she would come home, sit by the small piano in her living room, and practice for hours. She did not need anyone to watch her or applaud her. The joy came from the music itself. Her neighbors often heard the soft tunes drifting through the thin walls of the apartment building. Sometimes they would stop by, curious, expecting only a simple song. And indeed, most of the time, she played the easiest songs she knew. She played them perfectly, with care and attention, but they were familiar melodies, songs anyone could learn. And that was her way of practicing, of building a strong foundation. She believed that even the simplest song could become beautiful if played with the right feeling. Her teachers at the music school noticed her dedication. They praised her technique, her rhythm, and her sense of timing. But they never told her she was exceptional. She was just one of the many students, quiet and hard-working, who showed up every day to practice. Sometimes she wondered if they saw anything more than her diligence. Did they notice the way her hands could bring life to the keys? Did they understand how she felt every note, every chord, every pause? She did not know, and she did not ask. She simply played. On weekends, she would go to the small park near her apartment. There was an old piano there, slightly worn, with keys that were sometimes sticky, sometimes loose. It was not much, but she loved it. She would sit there for hours, playing for herself, feeling the wind on her face, the sun on her hands. People would walk by, glance at her, smile politely, and continue on their way. Some even dropped a coin into the open case at her feet. She did not mind the few who watched. She played for herself, for the music, not for applause. One rainy afternoon, she was sitting at the park piano, her coat pulled tightly around her shoulders, her fingers moving swiftly over the keys. A small crowd gathered, some children with their parents, some elderly people resting on the benches. She started with a simple song, one she had played countless times. It was light, cheerful, familiar. The crowd nodded, some clapped politely at the end. She smiled softly, thanked them, and continued. As she played, she felt something shift inside her. The melody began to change, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Her fingers moved on their own, following a rhythm that was not in the sheet music she had memorized. She did not think about the notes. She simply felt them. The song, which had started as something simple, began to grow into something richer, deeper, more complex. She did not notice the people around her. She did not notice the rain falling harder, soaking her hair and coat. All that mattered was the music. Some in the crowd paused, unsure of what they were hearing. The simple song they had expected was transforming into something entirely unexpected. Her hands flew over the keys, producing chords and melodies that seemed impossible for someone so young and quiet. Faces turned toward her, eyes wide with surprise and admiration. They whispered to one another, asking who she was, how she could play like that. She remained unaware of their fascination, lost in the sound she created. When the song finally ended, there was a moment of silence. The rain had slowed, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the applause came, tentative at first, then louder, stronger. She looked up, startled, and saw the crowd smiling at her. She had not played for them, yet they were cheering. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of surprise and happiness. She bowed slightly, thanked them, and gathered her coat. Ready to leave? Walking back to her apartment, she felt a sense of wonder she had never felt before. People had seen something in her music, something she had never expected to share. She wondered if she could do it again, if she could ever play like that on purpose, not just as a fleeting moment of feeling. The thought excited her and scared her at the same time. Could she show the world what she was capable of? Could she step out of her quiet life and let her music speak for her? That night, she could not sleep. She thought about the day, about the faces in the park, about the music that had poured from her fingers. She sat by her piano in the living room, the apartment quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. She played again, softly at first, then with more confidence, letting the music flow naturally. She experimented, tried new chords, new melodies, letting her instincts guide her. She realized that her love for music was more than a hobby, more than a quiet passion. It was a part of who she was. Days passed, and life continued as usual. She went to school, practiced, helped her family, and returned to the piano every evening. But something had changed. She no longer played just the easiest songs. She challenged herself, explored new melodies, and let her creativity take the lead. Her confidence grew, though she remained humble, still quiet, still observant. She did not crave attention. But she knew now that she could create something extraordinary if she allowed herself. Her family noticed the change. Her mother smiled at her in the evenings, asking her to play for a few minutes, just to hear the new music she was discovering. Her father listened with quiet pride, understanding that she was finding her own path, her own voice. Even the neighbors began to notice, stopping by occasionally, curious to hear the music that seemed to come alive in her small apartment. She welcomed them politely, but she played mainly for herself, the joy of creating something beautiful. One afternoon, her music teacher stopped by her apartment. They had come to pick up a sheet of music she had left at the school. They heard her playing and paused, standing quietly in the doorway. The teacher's eyes widened as they listened, recognizing the depth, the skill, the emotion in every note. For the first time, they spoke not of technique or practice, but of talent, of genius that was quietly emerging. She did not stop playing, and when she finally looked up, the teacher smiled warmly, nodding with genuine admiration. It was a moment of recognition she had longed for without knowing it. From that day on, she began to see herself differently. The quiet girl who played the easiest songs had begun a journey toward something greater. She understood that her music had power, that it could move people, that it could touch hearts, even without words. And though she remained humble, she felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She wanted to explore her abilities, to see how far she could go. To discover the full extent of the genius that lived within her, she continued to practice every day. Sometimes for hours, sometimes for minutes, but always with intention. She experimented with different styles, different techniques, and different emotions. The piano became not just a place for practice, but a place for discovery, for self-expression, for understanding herself in ways words could not. She realized that music was not just a skill. It was a language, a way to communicate feelings and stories that could not be spoken aloud, even as she grew in skill. She never lost her love for the simple songs she had started with. She understood now that the easiest melodies had taught her the most important lessons: patience, precision, feeling, and the joy of creating something from nothing. Every complex composition she played was built on the foundation of those simple beginnings, and she honored them by continuing to explore and expand her abilities. Her story was just beginning. The quiet afternoons, the simple songs, the solitary practice sessions, they were all pieces of a journey that would soon take her far beyond the small apartment, the park, and the familiar streets of her neighborhood. She did not yet know where her music would lead. She felt a deep certainty that it would take her somewhere extraordinary. And as she sat at her piano, fingers poised over the keys, she felt a quiet excitement, a sense that something amazing was waiting just beyond the next note. She woke up one morning to a message on her phone. It was from the community center near her apartment, announcing a small music recital for local talents. Anyone who wanted to participate could sign up. At first, she hesitated. She had never performed in front of a large audience outside her school or the park piano. She preferred the quiet, the privacy. The gentle sound of her own music filling a room without the pressure of expectations. But something inside her nudged her forward. Maybe this was the moment to see if she could share her music beyond the small circle she was used to. After thinking for a few days, she decided to sign up. She told her mother and father, who were supportive but curious. They asked if she was nervous, and she admitted she was. She had never played for a crowd that might really judge her. Her mother smiled and reminded her that music was not about proving anything to others, but about sharing a piece of herself. Her father gave her a small nod of encouragement, suggesting she just play as she felt comfortable. The day of the recital arrived. She carried her sheet music in a folder, her heart beating faster than she liked. She saw the small hall where the event was taking place, and it was filled with chairs and a modest stage. People chatted quietly, waiting for the performances to begin. She found a corner and practiced softly, moving her fingers over the piano keys, letting the familiar notes calm her. She noticed other participants, some older, some younger, all busy adjusting their instruments or rehearsing. Everyone seemed confident, and for a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Did she belong here? Was she ready? When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, her folder clutched to her chest. The lights were brighter than she expected, and the audience looked larger, more intimidating. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of her love for the piano, the comfort it always gave her. She adjusted the bench, placed her fingers on the keys, and started with the easiest song she knew. It was familiar, simple, and unassuming. She could feel the eyes of the audience on her, some polite, some skeptical, but she ignored them. The music was hers, and she played it as she always had. The first few bars went smoothly. She could sense the relief in her own chest, knowing she had started with something safe. The audience listened politely, some nodding along, some whispering softly to one another. She played with care, letting each note ring clearly. And then, almost without realizing it, her fingers began to move in ways she had not planned. The melody grew, expanding beyond the simple tune she had prepared. The chords shifted, the rhythm danced, and the music began to take on a life of its own. She felt a thrill, a spark that reminded her of the afternoons in the park piano. When music had flowed through her effortlessly, the audience noticed the change quickly. The simple song that had started politely was now transforming into something unexpected. Eyes widened, mouths slightly open, and whispers turned into quiet murmurs of admiration. She felt the energy in the room shift from polite attention to genuine fascination. She had not intended to surprise anyone, but the music carried her, and she let it. Her hands moved faster, more confidently, as if they had a mind of their own. Every note was precise yet full of emotion. Every pause measured yet alive with feeling. Some in the audience began to lean forward, captivated by the way the song had evolved. The music told a story, one that was not written on any sheet, one that only she could convey. She saw faces reflecting curiosity, wonder, and even disbelief. People whispered to their neighbors, asking how someone so young could play with such mastery. She remained focused, oblivious to the attention. Lost in the sound of the piano, in the rhythm of the music flowing through her, she felt alive, free, and more herself than ever before. The simple song became a canvas, and she painted it with her emotions, her skill, and her creativity. She experimented with tempo, adding subtle flourishes and unexpected harmonies. Her body moved naturally with the music, swaying slightly with the rhythm, fingers dancing across the keys. She could feel the audience holding their breath, sensing something extraordinary, though she did not aim for it. She was simply playing, simply expressing, simply being herself. And in that moment, the room seemed to vanish, leaving only her and the music. As the song reached its peak, she added a few delicate pauses, letting the notes linger, filling the hall with resonance. She played a complex section she had improvised only minutes ago, her hands moving in perfect coordination, each note clear and intentional. She felt a surge of pride and exhilaration, realizing she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The music was no longer just a private joy, it had become a bridge, connecting her to the audience in ways words could never achieve. When she finally finished, there was a moment of silence, almost as if the room could not believe what it had just heard. Then the applause erupted, hesitant at first, then stronger, louder, more enthusiastic. She looked up, surprised, and saw the crowd smiling, clapping, and even standing. She had not intended to impress anyone, yet they were cheering. She felt a warmth in her heart, a mixture of astonishment and happiness. She had shared something deeply personal, and the audience had received it with genuine admiration. As she walked off the stage, her legs trembling slightly, she realized she had crossed an invisible boundary. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, and it had felt natural, even exhilarating. She received quiet praise from the organizers, compliments from fellow performers, and even curious glances from those who had doubted her abilities. She thanked everyone politely, her heart still racing from the intensity of the performance. That evening, she reflected on the experience. She sat at her piano at home, replaying the moments in her mind, feeling the exhilaration of creating something that had moved others. She understood that her music had power, that it could communicate feelings and stories beyond words. The thought both thrilled and humbled her. She realized that performing was not about seeking attention, but about allowing the music to flow, trusting her instincts, and sharing a piece of herself with the world. Over the next few days, she noticed subtle changes in how people interacted with her. Her teachers at school were more attentive, curious to hear her play, asking about the recital and the improvisations she had made. Some of her classmates, who had never really noticed her, complimented her skill and asked if she would play again. Even her neighbors seemed to recognize a new confidence in her, a quiet pride in the way she carried herself. She did not seek recognition, but she could not help feeling encouraged. She continued to practice every day. But now her practice sessions were different. She experimented more, trying new melodies, combining simple songs with complex improvisations, testing her abilities. She played not just to perfect her technique, but to explore, to create, and to understand the depth of her own talent. Each session brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new joys. She realized that music was not a destination but a journey, one she was eager to follow wherever it led. The experience of the recitals stayed with her. She remembered the eyes of the audience, the sound of applause, the feeling of connection through music. She knew that performing outside her small, familiar spaces was possible, even enjoyable. And though she remained humble and quiet by nature, she began to see herself differently. She was not just a girl who played simple songs. She was a musician, capable of creating moments of wonder and beauty. Her family noticed the change too. Her mother asked her to play for a small gathering of friends and neighbors, and she did so with grace and ease. Her father listened quietly, pride shining in his eyes. They saw her confidence growing, not in arrogance but in self-assurance. In understanding that her music had value and meaning beyond her private practice sessions, they supported her quietly, giving her space to grow, to explore, to share her talent. One afternoon, she received an unexpected invitation from a local school. They had heard about her recital and wanted her to perform for their students. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Performing for a larger audience seemed daunting, but she knew she had grown since the first recital. She agreed, understanding that each performance was an opportunity to learn, to connect, and to grow as a musician. She spent the next few days preparing, experimenting with different pieces, practicing transitions, and exploring new ways to express herself. She focused not on impressing the audience, but on conveying her emotions through music. She understood that the true power of performance lay not in technical perfection, but in authenticity, in allowing the music to speak for itself. And when the day came, she stepped onto the stage with quiet determination, ready to let her music take over once again. The experience taught her that opportunity often came when she least expected it. She realized that stepping out of her comfort zone could lead to moments of growth, discovery, and connection. She understood that her talent was not just a personal joy, but a gift to share, a way to touch lives and inspire others. And though she remained humble, she began to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. Trusting that her music would guide her through the next steps of her journey, the day of the school performance arrived, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that she had never experienced before. She had practiced tirelessly over the past few days, not just the easy songs she knew, but also some new melodies she had created herself. Her fingers moved smoothly over the keys as she rehearsed at home, her music filling the apartment and making her feel alive. She thought about the audience she would face, the students and teachers who had never heard her play before. She wondered if they would understand her music, if they would feel what she felt every time her hands touched the keys. When she arrived at the school, she saw a larger stage than the community hall she had played in before. Bright lights shone down, and chairs were set up in rows for a bigger audience. Her stomach fluttered as she walked backstage, noticing other performers preparing. Some confident, some nervous, some chatting casually with friends. She tried to calm herself by taking deep breaths and thinking about the music itself, not the audience. Music had always been her comfort, her world. And she reminded herself that nothing else mattered when she played. The host of the event called her name, and she stepped forward, holding her sheet music lightly in her hands. The audience watched quietly, expecting perhaps a simple performance from the shy girl who had signed up. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and let her hands hover over the keys. For a moment she felt the weight of their attention, the curious eyes of strangers waiting for her to start. Then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed the first note. She began with an easy, familiar song. Her fingers moved gracefully, the notes clear and gentle. The audience listened, polite but not yet impressed. She could feel herself settling into the music, the familiar rhythms calming her nerves. And then, as she had done before, her hands began to move beyond the simple tune. She had planned to play only the easy song, but her emotions, her instincts, took over. The melody began to grow, twisting and turning, expanding into something richer and more complex. Her music began to tell a story, one that no one had heard before. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the change in the music. The simple song had transformed into something unexpected, something alive. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys, producing harmonies and rhythms that seemed to float effortlessly through the room. She did not think about each note. She felt them, letting the music guide her. The expressions in the audience changed from polite curiosity to surprise, fascination, and wonder. Whispers began to spread as people turned to see who was creating this extraordinary sound. She played with a freedom she had never felt before, each chord and melody emerging naturally. The easy song she had started with became a foundation for improvisation, creativity, and expression. She added subtle changes in tempo, unexpected pauses, and delicate ornaments that made the music feel alive. Her body moved gently with the rhythm, swaying with the emotions she was pouring into the performance. She felt every note in her heart, and the audience could feel it too, as she continued. She noticed some students in the audience leaning forward, captivated. Teachers watched silently, impressed by the depth and skill they were witnessing. Some people whispered to each other, unsure of how to describe what they were hearing. The shy girl who had started with an easy song was now commanding the room with music that seemed far beyond her years. She did not stop to notice the reaction. Focusing entirely on the sound, the rhythm, and the story her fingers were telling, the music reached a peak. A moment where the melody danced in a way that seemed impossible for someone so young. She added intricate passages, her hands moving in perfect coordination, each note clear and full of emotion. The audience sat in stunned silence, amazed by the skill and passion unfolding before them. She felt a surge of exhilaration, realizing that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice, a way to express feelings that could not be put into words. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, she glanced up for a brief moment and saw the audience completely absorbed. Eyes wide, mouths slightly open, hands resting gently on laps, all focused on the music. She felt a connection she had never experienced before. The music was not just for her anymore. It belonged to everyone in the room. It spoke directly to their hearts, carrying emotions and stories they could feel but not articulate. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment. knowing that her music could touch people in this way as the song drew to a close. She slowed her tempo, letting the final notes linger in the air. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if no one wanted the music to end. She played the last chord softly, allowing it to fade naturally, and then she lifted her hands from the keys. For a moment, there was complete silence. The audience did not know how to respond, so moved were they by the performance. And then, slowly, the applause began, hesitant at first, then louder and stronger, filling the hall with appreciation and admiration. She looked up, surprised, her heart racing. The audience was clapping, smiling, some even standing. She had not planned to impress anyone, yet they were cheering for her. She felt a mixture of shock, pride, and happiness. Her performance had been spontaneous in many ways, guided by emotion and instinct rather than strict preparation. And the audience had recognized its authenticity and beauty. She bowed gently, thanking them, and gathered her sheet music, her hands trembling slightly from the intensity of the experience. Backstage, she was met by teachers and students who complimented her on the performance. They asked questions, eager to know how she had created such music from a simple song. Some performers admitted they had been nervous before, but after hearing her, they felt inspired. She smiled, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment but not arrogance. She understood that her music had done more than entertain. It had connected with people in a way that words could not. That evening, walking home through the streets, she replayed the performance in her mind. She thought about the audience's faces, the applause, and the emotions she had felt while playing. She realized that performing was not about seeking approval or recognition. It was about sharing a piece of herself through her music. She understood that every performance, no matter how small or large, was an opportunity to connect, to inspire, and to express emotions that could not be spoken. Over the next few days, she practiced differently. She still played her simple songs, but now she added new layers, experimenting with improvisation and emotional expression. She explored different techniques, trying to understand how each note and chord could convey feeling. She realized that her music had depth and power, and she was eager to explore its full potential. Each session brought new discoveries, new joys, and new challenges. She felt herself growing, not just as a musician, but as a person learning to trust her instincts and embrace her own abilities. Her family noticed a change too. Her mother asked her to play for close friends who visited, and her father listened quietly with pride. They saw her confidence growing, not in arrogance, but in self-assurance and a deeper understanding of her talent. She shared her music more willingly, though she remained humble, preferring to let her music speak rather than talking about her achievements. Her neighbors, who had once only heard her simple songs, began to see her differently. Curious about the girl who could transform ordinary melodies into something extraordinary, one afternoon, she received an invitation from another local school, asking her to perform for a slightly larger audience. She felt excitement but also nervousness. The thought of a bigger stage and more listeners was intimidating, but she remembered the feeling of connection she had experienced during the last performance. She knew that if she allowed herself to focus on the music rather than the audience, she could create something beautiful once again. She agreed, understanding that each performance was a chance to grow, to explore, and to share her gift with others. In the days leading up to the new performance, she experimented with her music even more. She combined easy songs with improvisation, explored complex harmonies, and played with dynamics and tempo. Each practice session brought a new challenge and a new reward. She realized that music was not just a skill to be mastered, but a language to be spoken, a story to be told, and an emotion to be shared. She felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. Knowing that her music could reach others in a profound way, the school performance became a turning point in her life. She began to see herself not just as a quiet girl who loved music, but as a musician with the ability to inspire and move others. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It required courage, practice, and a willingness to share oneself. And though she remained humble and quiet by nature, she felt a growing determination to continue exploring her abilities, to discover the full extent of the genius that lived within her, and to see where her music could take her next. The next performance was set in a larger auditorium, a place she had never been before. The stage was wide, the lights bright, and the chairs filled with a bigger audience than she had ever imagined. She felt her heart pound as she walked backstage. Her hands shook slightly, but she reminded herself that the piano was her world, her safe place, and that she had played this way before. She took a deep breath, letting the anticipation build, knowing that today she could reach further with her music. She was called onto the stage, and the crowd of students, teachers, and parents turned to look at her. They expected a simple performance, a quiet piece, perhaps the shy girl they had heard about in passing. She smiled faintly and sat at the piano. The keys were cold under her fingers at first. But as soon as she pressed the first note, she felt a familiar warmth flow through her. The opening melody was simple, as she often started, but already she felt the music stretching, expanding beyond what she had intended. Her hands began to move on their own, flowing into an improvisation that surprised even herself. The simple song she had chosen was slowly transforming. The rhythm shifted, chords intertwined in unexpected ways, and a melody emerged that seemed to soar above the room. The audience listened in stunned silence, captivated by the sudden depth and brilliance of her playing. Some leaned forward, curious, trying to follow each note, while others simply sat back, letting the sound wash over them. She played with total focus, unaware of the eyes upon her, unaware of the whispers and gasps that occasionally escaped the audience. Every note came from her heart, every chord a reflection of her emotions. She felt a connection to the piano she had never felt so strongly, as if it were an extension of herself, responding to her feelings and thoughts with a language only music could speak. The improvisation grew, carrying with it her own experiences, her joy, her uncertainty, and her courage. The audience was transfixed. The simplicity of the song at the beginning had set a calm, a familiar tone, but now they were witnessing something extraordinary. The music seemed to paint pictures in the mind, stories without words, emotions that could not be spoken aloud. She noticed some faces reflecting astonishment, others admiration, and a few with tears glistening quietly. Her music had found a way into their hearts without effort, without any intent to show off. It was pure, honest, and raw. She continued to build the song, adding layers of harmony and complexity, feeling the energy of the room feed back into her fingers. The improvisation became bolder, more daring. She experimented with dynamics, letting some notes fall softly like whispers. Others rise in crescendos that filled every corner of the auditorium. She lost herself in the performance, her mind completely absorbed in the music, her heart pumping with exhilaration. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the sound she created. Some audience members exchanged looks, trying to comprehend the skill they were witnessing. How could someone so young, so quiet, create something that felt so alive and compelling? It was not just technique. It was the emotion, the instinct, the genius that revealed itself in every phrase. Whispers grew into soft murmurs of admiration. Cameras flashed quietly, and a few brave attendees leaned in, hoping to capture the moment. She noticed none of it. She only played, letting the music guide her, letting her hands speak what words could not, as she moved through the performance. The initial easy song became a framework for complex improvisations, playful rhythms, and emotional passages that seemed to emerge effortlessly. Each transition was seamless, each chord deliberate yet natural. She added subtle touches, delicate ornaments, unexpected notes that enriched the music and held the audience completely enthralled. They were not listening to a simple recital anymore. They were witnessing an artist revealing the depths of her talent in real time. Her emotions flowed freely through the piano. She thought about her early days, the quiet afternoons in her apartment, the park piano, the small audiences that had watched her without realizing her potential. All those moments had built her foundation, each practice session a stepping stone to this very moment. She felt gratitude, pride, and exhilaration as she expressed herself fully. She realized that the audience was not just watching her. They were part of the music, sharing in the journey she created with every note. The music reached a climax, a moment where harmony, melody, and rhythm combined into a soaring expression of her genius. She played with confidence and precision, but more importantly, with feeling. Every note carried her emotion, every chord resonated with her experience. The audience could feel it, and their reactions reflected the intensity of the moment. Silence, wonder, admiration, and awe filled the auditorium simultaneously. She played on, uninterrupted by thoughts of judgment or expectation, fully immersed in the music when the final notes faded into the air. The room remained still for a heartbeat longer than she expected. Then, as if on cue, applause erupted, growing louder and more enthusiastic by the second. Some stood, some clapped vigorously, some whispered words of amazement to their neighbors. She looked up, startled, her chest swelling with a mixture of pride, joy, and humility. She had not played to impress, yet her music had moved every person in the room, leaving them breathless and inspired. After stepping off the stage, she was met with congratulations, praises, and even questions from teachers and audience members. They wanted to know how she had created such music, how she had transformed a simple song into something so breathtaking. She smiled quietly, explaining that she had only followed her feelings and let the music flow. She did not boast, but there was a quiet pride in her eyes that reflected the understanding that she had achieved something extraordinary that night. Walking home, she replayed the performance in her mind. The intensity, the connection, the emotions she had shared and experienced were vivid and unforgettable. She thought about how music had allowed her to communicate something beyond words, to reach the hearts of strangers, and to reveal a piece of herself that had been hidden in quiet moments. She understood that this was only the beginning of her journey, and that every performance would be another opportunity to explore, to share, and to grow. Over the following days, she continued to practice with a renewed sense of purpose. She experimented with improvisation, melodies, and emotional expression. Each session was an adventure, a chance to discover something new about herself and her music. She felt more confident, more willing to take risks, and more aware of the power of her art. Her family noticed the change too, offering quiet support, encouraging her growth without pressure. They understood that her talent was unfolding naturally. They were proud to witness her journey. She also noticed the way others reacted to her music. Fellow students, teachers, and neighbors spoke with admiration, curiosity, and encouragement. They asked her to play again, sought her guidance, or simply shared how her music had touched them. She remained humble, focusing not on the attention but on the joy of creating and sharing music. She knew that recognition was secondary to the experience of expressing herself fully and authentically. One afternoon, she received an invitation to a larger event, a regional recital that would bring together talented musicians from multiple schools. The thought was thrilling but intimidating. The stage would be bigger, the audience larger, and the expectations higher. Yet she felt ready, knowing that the experiences she had gained, the confidence she had built, and the connection she had felt through her music had prepared her. She accepted the invitation, excited to see how far her talent could reach. In the days leading up to the regional recital, she practiced even more intensely, exploring new techniques and emotions. She combined simple songs with improvisation, experimented with dynamics and tempo, and allowed her creativity to flow without constraints. Each session revealed new possibilities, new discoveries, and new joys. She realized that music was not just about skill. It was about expression, communication, and the ability to touch hearts. As the recital approached, she reflected on her journey. From quiet afternoons at the apartment piano, to playing in the park, to the school performances. Each step had been a part of her growth. She understood now that talent alone was not enough. It required courage, dedication, and a willingness to share oneself fully. She felt ready for the challenge, confident that her music could speak for her and reach the hearts of those who listened. And as she prepared to step onto the stage once more, she knew that her genius was not just in her skill, but in her ability to connect, inspire, and express herself through the piano in ways that words could never capture. The day of the regional recital arrived, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nerves like never before. She had prepared for weeks, experimenting with new melodies, adding personal touches to her favorite pieces and practicing improvisation that felt natural to her. The venue was grander than any she had performed in, with a larger stage, brighter lights, and rows upon rows of chairs filled with an audience eager to hear the performers. She felt her heart race, but she reminded herself that music had always been her refuge, her way to express herself, and that she could rely on it now more than ever. Backstage, she saw other performers preparing, each with their own confidence and nerves. Some practiced quietly, others chatted with friends. She remained focused, reviewing her music in her mind and imagining the feeling of playing for an audience that might never forget her performance. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her sheet music, but she took deep breaths, letting her mind settle into the rhythm of the piano she loved so much. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by the sight of a full auditorium. The audience's attention was on her, waiting for the performance of a girl they had heard whispers about. She smiled faintly, sat at the piano, and let her fingers hover over the keys. She began with a familiar, simple song, one that had always brought her comfort. The audience listened, expecting an ordinary performance. But she had already decided that this day would be different as soon as the first notes rang out. She felt the music take over. Her fingers moved beyond the simple melody, improvising naturally and confidently. The song expanded, flowing into complex chords, harmonies, and rhythms that she had never played in front of an audience before. The music was alive, carrying her emotions and thoughts in a language only the piano could speak. She lost herself in the performance, unaware of the audience's reactions, yet feeling the energy and connection between herself and every listener in the room. The audience watched in stunned silence, their polite curiosity transforming into amazement. The simple song had evolved into a performance that revealed her depth, creativity, and emotional expression. She played with confidence, grace, and authenticity, each note carrying meaning and intention. The improvisation grew, intertwining melodies and harmonies in ways that seemed impossible, yet flowed effortlessly from her heart and hands. Every movement of her fingers expressed her joy, fear, hope, courage. Some people in the audience leaned forward, captivated by the music, while others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Teachers, students, and parents alike whispered in awe, trying to grasp how such beauty could emerge from someone so young. The performance was no longer just about the notes. It was about the story they told, the emotions they conveyed, and the connection they created. Her music reached into the hearts of everyone listening, leaving a profound impact as the piece progressed. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and expression, each section carrying a different feeling, a different chapter in the story she was telling. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, to let her deepest emotions guide her hands. The piano became an extension of herself, responding to every thought, every feeling, in creating a performance that was raw, honest, and breathtaking. The audience could feel her presence, her journey, and her genius without a single word being spoken. The climax of the performance was powerful. She played with a mix of intensity and delicacy, each note resonating deeply. The music soared, then softened, creating waves of emotion that carried the listeners along. Some were moved to tears, some sat in wide-eyed wonder, and all were captivated by the authenticity and beauty of what they were hearing. She felt a rush of exhilaration, realizing that her talent, her dedication, and her love for music had culminated in this extraordinary moment.